Right, so for the velocity, we can't really follow this line because we have time shifted it, and I don't want to change that because that's, we only need these on the first frame. So for the velocity, I've got to go back up here, and I need to unpack it again. Okay. And we want to grab that velocity attribute, which will have been on the packed geometry. So let's just head forward a bit so we do have some velocity, and we can see it there. Okay, looks cool. We don't need the polygons, so if we drop an add node and then check delete geometry but keep the points, right? So you can see it's starting to look similar to that, right? It's just a point cloud. Okay, and then we need volume rasterize attributes. Okay, and then plug that in there, and then we're going to set this to V. What I'm going to do here, let me just double check. Press spacebar and F. Okay, so yeah, there are points here where we have a lot of geometry kind of shooting off, and this will turn into quite a big volume, right? It's going to occupy all of that space. So I'm going to do this now. Up here, I'm going to drop a delete up here while it's still packed, so we can kind of grab the whole piece of geometry, right? And then just set this to a big bounding box. So 20 by 20 by 20. Maybe by 30, make it a bit wider, and then just raise it up and delete non-selected. Okay, so we keep everything within the camera there, but we don't have pieces flying off, well, the pieces that are flying off to the right, because that will, we'll be creating volumes all the way down here in the simulation as well. And even with the sparse, a simulation, it will get big really quick. So, because we've got pieces flying off really fast. So, and they're not in the camera, so we're not going to worry about them. If you wanted to do that, I'd maybe take a look at doing it in a separate simulation, a bit like trails. But we're not going to do that right now. So we got that sorted. So when they start to fly out, you can see they just get deleted. Okay, so we're going to rasterize the velocity. So you can see right away it looks really weird. Unfortunately, it just does. The velocity volume in the viewport just always kind of looks strange, that it doesn't really know how to display it. But that's fine. So I'm going to drop the voxel size down to 0.05. I think that's what we had here. Well, 0.05 is what worked for me before. And I had the particle scale, I think I dropped that down. There we go. So we're not so yeah, we don't have any P scale on this, right? Let me just see here. If we go here and then into our geometry spreadsheets, and the P scale is 0.1. So I've got a 0.2 there, is pretty much the same. So that's kind of the area of influence of the points, because we've got a bit more of a sparse thing going on here with the points. I set that to 0.2. Okay, and you could use velocity blur here. You can see that what that does is that's better with if you've got density and velocity coming in at the same time, and you can stretch that density along the length of the velocity, along the vector of the velocity on that same point, right? So that helps with, like in a simulation, you get that kind of stepping thing where you see each simulation step, you can see where something has been emitted. So if you streak the volume along that the line of the velocity, then that kind of helps. We don't need to do it here since we're just emitting on pretty much the first frame. So we got the velocity there, and you can see the velocity volume. So all we do now is just merge that in with our other volume. Okay, go back to the first frame. And then in here, we want to be in sourcing. We're not bringing any velocity in, so it's not going to do anything until we actually import it in. So it changes to vector, okay, because it's a vector volume. Right, you can see that. Okay, we've got 3 channels there. Oops. So the source volume was V, and remember, in the target field is always val. It has to be called val. This we could change, but this will always be called val. And I'm going to change this to pull, just like temperature, and I'm going to set it to 50 and 0. So we're going to, I want that big, strong pull or push, I suppose, as it's an explosion. So let's see if that has an effect. Remember, before nothing really was happening. So let's try that. There we go. So we're getting some movement now. See the whole thing kind of getting pushed across. And once we bring in the collider and drop, give ourselves some more voxels, it will look much more interesting.